Can gospel music be saved? I don't know, because if gospel music isn't dead, it's definitely on life support and it's hanging on by a thread. But I do think that there are some ways that, if done right, gospel music can at least get back to some semblance of what we had and what it was in its sort of golden era. So in this video, what I'm going to do is propose 3 ways I think that that can happen. And I think all of them are really going to shock you. What I'm going to say is going to shock you. So I'll start by talking about, I think this all starts with the church itself, because I think it's the problem with gospel music now is a bit of a systemic issue. And here's what I mean. So I just think the church needs to start this process, and they need to do it by doing a better job with supporting musicians. Here's what I mean. And I'm not just talking about money here, although that's included. I'm not just talking about money, though. The thing is, a lot of the gospel music that we've had previously and in previous times were written by artists and musicians out of 2 things. One, out of struggle and out of pain. You hear a lot of that in the modern gospel music. It's written out of struggle and pain. But the other aspect of that is that the music was written out of a sense of belonging and community. So, for example, you take a song like, in the previous video, I mentioned Walter Hawkins as one of the pioneering gospel artists. You take one of his songs like "Oh Happy Day," and that song in and of itself, it's not like a downtrodden, like pain song, like a, oh, woe is me kind of slavery song kind of thing. It's more of a community song. I think that's one of the reasons it did so well, because of the community aspect of it. Funny story too about that song, about "Oh Happy Day." So you remember the movie Sister Act 2, where they sang that song in the movie, and that was like the sort of the theme song of the movie. The guy that sung "Oh Happy Day" in that movie, his name is Ryan Toby, and he and I went to college together. He actually went to Grambling State University too. He only ended up staying a couple of semesters, but I remember him being there. So he and I had a couple of music classes and stuff together too, but funny story about that. Anyway, I do think that this is where it starts. It starts with this church issue, or the church just doing a better job with supporting musicians in these ways. So things like I say, outside of pay, things like supporting musicians getting music lessons, things like supporting them going to, different music conferences and stuff, where they learn and they bring the things that they learn not only back to the church, but that'll also go into how they write and what they write when they start writing music, or when they're writing music, period. You see how that works? So it starts with this sort of foundational issue, or foundational thing of just getting back to that sense of belonging and community and supporting musicians a lot better than what we're doing now. Now, also, I say one of the things that, on the musician side of it, I think that one of the things that we have to focus on is getting back to this sense of earnestness in our music, and a desire to just really be of service to other people. What I mean by that is that I think what you will hear in a lot of the gospel music, the modern gospel music, is this sense of the songs were written in order to either make money or to gain fame and success and all of that. You can just kind of tell about, or in how a lot of it is written and how a lot of it is performed. And, I get that there has to be a little bit of an aspect of that for something to be successful. So I'm not necessarily knocking it. I just think what has happened is that it's leaned too far in that direction. And we need to get it back to a sense of, like, the songs that we play and that we write and that we put out has this sense of earnestness in it, where it's done simply just to help people, to inspire people. So when we're writing music, we're thinking about, how can this song inspire somebody? How can I write this lyric? How can I put this music to it in a way that's going to help somebody, bring somebody, some joy or some peace, or just inspire them to be a better person? Getting back to a sense of that, and not leaning so far into the commercialization part of it. That's the word I've been saying, that gospel music has been commercialized. Not leaning so far into that aspect of it and having a healthy balance of those things. I think that's really that foundational thing that's going to kind of get us back to where we were, or at least some sense of it. And not only that, even zooming out from that systemic issue, see, a lot of gospel music has to be accepted by not only church people. In order for it to be accepted, I think, by the mass, or the masses of people, I'm going to say this, and it just is what it is.
Hey, let me ask you a question. Are you still playing $7,500 gigs and wondering why your music career isn't moving forward? Do you feel stuck? Burned out? Well, if you're tired of hustling, I want to invite you to my free 3-day challenge called From Burnout to Booked. It's designed for musicians just like you to get more gigs, raise your rates, and finally get clear on your music path. You'll walk away with a proven roadmap, real coaching, and a strategy that just works, whether you're in a major music city or not. Just scan the QR code that's on the screen or click the link in the description of this video to save your spot. And if you want my personal help, make sure you get in on the VIP experience. Let's get you booked, paid, and back in control. Now back to the video.
A lot of this church crap and negativity and all of that stuff that happens within our church that stuff is going to have to stop too. That's zooming out a little bit, far from the specific musician thing, but it plays a huge role in it. This is an argument that I've made for years now. Like all of this stuff that's happened with, these preachers like Creflo Dollar, where, he's asking his church for money to pay for a jet. All of that kind of stuff where, who was it? Was it not Juanita Bottom? It was Kim Burrell. At Kim Burrell's church a few years ago, a video came out where she was bashing, homosexual people in what she was saying in her church in one of her sermons or something like that. It was, or at least it was taken as bashing. Stuff like here in my city in Houston, where, back a few years ago where we had Hurricane Harvey, and you got Joel Ostein of Lakewood here. There's a big controversy going on with him that when people were stranded and in need and they had lost their homes and all of that kind of stuff and they needed somewhere to go, he didn't open up his church. And with all of those situations, I know there's contingencies and there's other situations around that, but I'm just talking about the perception that stuff has caused. Another example that I use is Bishop Eddie Long, when he was alive, where he's accused of, sexually assaulting young boys, and like you got court cases with all of that kind of stuff. I don't think people understand how much a lot of that stuff plays a role in how the church is seen by the masses of people. So, and how it's contributed to the church decline. See, this is why I'm talking about this, and this is how it relates to musicians. The more of that kind of stuff that you have, and the more that the decline of the church and stuff happens, that includes musicians. I know a lot of musicians now that are just leaving church and renouncing Christianity. They're doing all of it. What's the guy from, what's the guy, the big church and what you call it, where he announced that he was leaving Christianity? I can't remember his name. I'll put that on the screen if I remember it. But like you have a lot of this stuff. So what I'm saying here, we're talking about, can gospel music be saved? So in order for it to have some semblance of what it was and for people to take it seriously, all of that stuff needs to, it needs to change. The church needs to have a little bit of a different face to it. So now another thing that I will say, here's my point my number 2 thing. I said I was going to mention 3 things about how gospel music can be saved. Here's number 2. Number 2 has to do with us musicians. We have to reduce the complexity of the music that we're writing and that we're putting out. We just do. Here's the thing. Don't hear me wrong. What I'm saying, and let me just preface everything that I'm saying here with this fact. I'm not talking about I'm with everything that I'm going to mention here, I'm talking about a balance of stuff. I'm not necessarily talking about getting rid of one thing and replacing it for another. I'm talking about the balance. And what has happened in modern times because of the commercialization of gospel music, again, you've heard me talk about that, that we've tried to do these things to please niches in the gospel music industry. So I've always said that there's a difference between music written for musicians, or music written that only or mostly musicians are going to like, and then music that's written for everybody else that's not a musician and don't care about the technical stuff that we're talking about. And what has happened is it has leaned so far to that. We've gotten so complex with what we've done with the production of our songs, from the click tracks to the entire orchestras and horn sections and professional singers that can pretty much sing anything, that can do runs. And we're writing music with all of these gospel runs in it that you got to be literally a trained singer or somebody that's been singing your whole life to be able to do correctly, at least. And one of the things I say all the time is that we got to understand that the typical people, the majority of people that are going to be singing our songs and enjoying our songs are not those kind of people. They're not professional musicians. They're not technically proficient in a lot of that stuff. They're average, everyday people who simply love music. And we got to give them something to do. One of the things I talk about all the time is Ty Tribbett's music is a perfect example of this. At least to some degree. Not all of his stuff is like super complex or complicated. But like, imagine a average church choir. So average, this is what I talk about all the time. You got an average church choir where the church choir, if they got a choir, it's probably Gen X people or older, Gen X or baby boomers. So you're talking about people 40, 45 on up in the choir. Mostly, that's what you're going to have in a typical church choir. You're going to have musicians that's probably of the same age. Imagine a church like, well, let me finish that. You got the audience probably of the same age too. Now imagine a church and a choir like that singing Only One Night Though. Only One Night Though. Like, that's not going to move them at all. So my point is that we have to reduce this complexity of this music so that we give these people something to do. Now, again, I'm not saying get rid of all of the complexity. I'm a musician myself and I love this stuff. I'm a trained musician. I love to put my technicality in the music that I write. But again, just having a healthy balance of this type of music that we put out. And when we do that, I think that gives gospel music a better chance of surviving, because again, you'll have more people that will adopt it, and people won't feel alienated. That's the thing about it. And I didn't even talk about the musicians. I did a little bit, but you imagine like the older musicians or something that's of that age, they're not really interested in the hip hop sounding gospel and the technically, they can only play in, C, F, B flat, A flat, and D flat. So it's like, I'm kidding, but you do understand how that works. So we're writing songs in in A major and E major and all, which is fine. And then we're throwing all of the complex stuff in there. We're alienating these people. We're alienating the people that would normally adopt the music if it was easier for them to do. So again, I think that that's one of the really most important things that we got to do to kind of save gospel music, is just to kind of, reduce the complexity of it. Another thing is, we have to sort of tone down the performance and the entertainment aspect of the gospel music as well. So it's funny, church people get all up in arms over the word perform or performance. It's this word that's been taken as this sort of bad thing in our churches and all of that kind of stuff when it comes to like music and what we do as musicians. I don't know why. Just at the end of the day, it's a fact that what we do inherently has a performance aspect to it. Point blank, period. It just is what it is. But I think that we've taken it too far. And again, If you think about stuff like Kirk Franklin, where and Kirk Franklin's my guy, it's one of my favorite gospel artists of all time. But the dude is out popping and locking on stage, when he's performing. And it's like, okay, that's cool. And I think some of us get a kick out of it. But again, it's about understanding where we are and in the time that we're in, and understanding that the way that the masses accept or see stuff like that is not the way that we think about it as church people. You get what I'm saying? Like, they're already out there, and they see reasons and stuff all the time. They see the news articles of the stuff that I talked about, where Eddie Long is accused of what he was accused of, and Joel Osteen doesn't open up his church, and Creflo Dollar is asking for money to buy a jet and all of that kind of stuff. And Kirk Franklin is pop locking on stage where he's got his muscles out and all of that kind of stuff, looking like he's on a R&B concert with Genuine. So we gotta keep that kind of stuff in mind about when we're doing the stuff that we're doing. So this goes into the part of what I was talking about, reducing a lot of the complexity of our music to reducing the performance aspect of it. Give people something to enjoy for sure. Give them something to rock and clap to and all of that for sure. But just being really careful about, I guess the beats and all of that kind of stuff that we're throwing into our music, and even the stuff that we're using to produce it. I mentioned Only One Night by Ty Tribbett. In the video of that song, you got the drummer. I think that they performed it live. Got the drummer actually using a drum machine on there, and it's like an 808. It sounds like a trap song, and that puts people in that mood to kind of do something else. Now, again, hear me clearly. I'm not saying take all of that stuff away. I enjoy it. I sing Only One Night though. The song is catchy, so I'm not dissing any of that stuff. I'm just talking about really thinking about, if we're going to save gospel music, getting back to some semblance of what it was, and that where it has that earnestness, and we've reduced this performance aspect of it. Now, number 3, and this is the third one. I think this one is the most important one. I think in order to get gospel music saved or get it off life support, if that's what it is, that we need to establish what I'm calling a mentorship movement. Establish a mentorship movement. When I was coming up as a musician, one of the things that really inspired me about being a musician, and that made me want to play music and be a church musician and all of that kind of stuff, was the musicians that I saw there before me. I was really, really inspired by them. And I remember there were quite a few of them that I would have given every single dollar in my pocket just to spend some time with them and pick their brains and have them show me some chords or some drum licks or whatever it was at the time. And that bred into my fire for wanting to learn more, for wanting to get better, for going to school and getting a degree in music, all of that kind of stuff. It really established that for me because I had models to model myself after. Not only musically, but also manly, just men. And I'm of course, women are watching this too, and women are included in this. But I'm just talking about, for me, there was men, real men that I could pattern my life after. That was, that did stuff as men. They took care of their families and all of that kind of stuff. All of this kind of stuff where we had this mentorship kind of model that I think we've just lost. And well, the result of that is that the younger musicians that have come up don't have that sort of guidance. So they're writing and stuff. And in a world of social media where everything is about likes, follow, subscribes, and all of that kind of stuff, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, everything is about that. And you have this sort of veneer that's out there that's, life appears to be this way when you do these things. A lot of the younger musicians are going for that kind of stuff. It makes it easier for them to, let me produce this hot gospel song with this R&B beat to it. Let me make it super complex because this is what's getting attention, or at least seemingly getting attention. Right? And there's no mentorship model. You know, the real truth is that if gospel music is going to be saved, it's going to come from both us seasoned musicians and the younger musicians really working together to revive it. And there's been a lot of infighting, which this is the case in every genre of music, but definitely as we're talking about gospel music here, there's been a lot of infighting. You know, the older musicians are talking about the musicians, the younger musicians, they're doing everything wrong. They shouldn't be doing this here and all of that kind of stuff. The younger musicians are complaining about, oh, y'all past the time, shut up and let us cook kind of thing, right? So because of that, there's really been this disconnect between that. And again, if we're talking about establishing this whole big foundation to save gospel music, this whole big thing where all of the components are working together to get gospel music back where it needs to be, this is a big part of it. Having that sort of mentorship model for the younger musicians who are writing. So basically, we let the young musicians cook, but we give them the recipes. See how that works? That's just how this is going to have to work. So us working together in a way that fosters the mutual care of gospel music, I think is the really the biggest thing. So again, it starts with the systemic issue. It starts with, the church really supporting musicians in a way that fosters writing better gospel music, and then toning down that entertainment part of it, the performance part of it, the performative antics of just not only gospel music. This is something I have to get into in another video, but just the performative aspect of church altogether, like that's a whole different story. But just toning that kind of stuff down a little bit and getting back to the earnestness of it. And then again, just having this mentorship model where we have the older musicians and the younger musicians working together to bring this back to where it needs to be. So let me know what you think about those three things. Let me know in the comments. And if you have any more suggestions about what you think that would help gospel music work, definitely let me know in the comments. I read all of the comments, and this is an ongoing conversation we can have. So drop those in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.